A veteran's dog waits 8 years at the same place. Rain, snow, thunder. He never leaves. Locals call it loyalty. But what if it's something more? Every single day, this aging German Shepherd returns to the same roadside, as if guarding a secret no one dares to see. Then one stormy night, everything changes. A powerful man wants that land cleared. A woman with a hidden past is risking everything to protect what's left. And as danger closes in, what the dog reveals will shock the entire town. What was he really waiting for? And why now, after 8 long years, does he finally move? You being here is a reminder. The quiet acts of love and kindness still matter. If you hold space for compassion, you're already part of this community. The morning sun cast long shadows across Highway 84 as it rose over the Montana mountains. There, at mile marker 32, just outside Cedar Falls, sat a weathered German Shepherd, his graying muzzle resting on his paws. Ranger's amber eyes remained fixed on the winding road ahead, watching, waiting, just as he had done every day for the past 8 years. The spot where he kept his vigil had become something of a landmark. A small wooden cross marked the place where Marine Corporal Frank Hutchinson's truck had left the road that rainy October night. Fresh flowers appeared regularly at its base, offerings from townspeople who had come to know the story of the faithful dog who refused to leave. Sarah Miller, who ran the local diner, pulled her pickup truck onto the gravel shoulder. The familiar crunch of tires made Ranger's ears twitch, but his gaze never left the horizon. She stepped out carrying a plastic container and a bowl of fresh water. "Morning, old friend," she said softly, setting down the offerings a few feet from where Ranger lay. "Brought you some of that chicken pot pie you like." The aging shepherd acknowledged her presence with a gentle thump of his tail against the ground, but maintained his watch. Sarah had tried, like many others, to bring him home during that first difficult year. But Ranger always found his way back, no matter the distance or obstacles. Tommy Jenkins, the school bus driver, slowed the big yellow bus as he passed, the children inside pressing their faces against the windows. They had grown up seeing Ranger there, and their teachers had turned his story into lessons about loyalty and love. Some of the younger kids had never known a time when the faithful dog wasn't part of their daily routine. "That dog's got more determination than most folks I know," old Joe Barrett would say from his usual perch at the hardware store. 8 years, rain or shine, snow or heat. Seen him out there during the big blizzard of 2019, nearly buried in snow, but still watching that road. The local veterinarian, Dr. Peterson, made regular visits to check on Ranger's health. The community had pooled together to cover his medical expenses, ensuring the aging guardian remained healthy enough to continue his watch. A small shelter had been built nearby, though Ranger only used it during the worst weather. "He's not just waiting," Dr. Peterson often explained to concerned visitors. "That dog's protecting something. You can see it in his eyes. There's purpose there, not just grief." Through the seasons, Ranger maintained his post. Spring brought wild Montana flowers that swayed around him in the breeze. Summer days saw him panting in the shade of a young pine tree that had grown tall enough to offer refuge from the scorching sun. Fall painted the mountains in brilliant colors, and winter draped his world in white. But nothing deterred him from his duty. Mary Thompson, who taught 4th grade at Cedar Falls Elementary, often brought her class on field trips to visit. "Ranger teaches us about love," she would tell her wide-eyed students. "Sometimes love means staying true to a promise, even when it's hard." The children would leave treats and drawings, creating a colorful collection that the wind would eventually carry away. But Ranger remained, constant as the mountains themselves. Local law enforcement had learned to work around him. Deputy Wilson made it part of his regular patrol to check on the dog, especially during severe weather. "He's not just some lost soul," he would report back to the station. "That dog's got more focus than half my deputies." The town council had even officially designated the spot as a memorial site, installing a small parking area and a bench where visitors could sit and reflect. The plaque told Frank and Ranger's story, though most locals knew it by heart, how the Marine and his faithful companion had served together overseas, how Frank had adopted Ranger after their tour, and how fate had torn them apart on that wet mountain road. As the years passed, Ranger's muzzle grew wider, his movements slower, but his dedication never wavered. Each morning, as the sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, he would make his way from the shelter to his watching spot. Each evening, as darkness crept over the mountains, he would maintain his vigil until the stars emerged. Tourists passing through would often stop, drawn by the unusual sight of the solitary dog. They'd read the plaque, take photos, and leave shaking their heads in wonder at such unwavering faithfulness. "That dog knows something we don't," Clara Webster, the town's eldest resident, would say from her porch rocker. 8 years is a long time to wait, without a reason. Mark my words, Ranger's got a purpose we just can't see yet. And so the days continued, each one much like the last. The people of Cedar Falls went about their lives, but they drew strength from the quiet guardian at mile marker 32. In a world that seemed to move too fast, where loyalty often felt like a relic of the past, Ranger remained, a steadfast reminder that some bonds transcend even death itself. Dexter Carmichael stood at his floor-to-ceiling window on the 20th floor of the Cedar Falls Business Center, hands clasped behind his back. His silver hair caught the morning light as he surveyed the landscape below, like a king examining his domain. The expanse of Montana wilderness spread out before him, and where others saw natural beauty, he saw dollar signs. He turned as his assistant entered, carrying a thick folder. "The land survey reports you requested, Mr. Carmichael." "Excellent." He took the folder and spread the contents across his mahogany desk. Maps, property records, and development plans covered the polished surface. His manicured finger traced a line across one of the drawings, stopping at a small marked area along Highway 84. "This spot continues to be a thorn in my side." The assistant nodded knowingly. "The memorial site, sir, with the dog." Carmichael's lips tightened into a thin line. "An eyesore, that's what it is. Right in the middle of what should be the main entrance to Cedar Falls Resort and Golf Club." He tapped the spot on the map with growing irritation. $300 million in projected revenue, and it's being held up by a mutt and a wooden cross. He pulled out his phone and dialed a familiar number. "Commissioner Edwards? Dexter Carmichael here. I wanted to follow up on our discussion about relocating that roadside memorial." He listened for a moment, his expression darkening. "I understand community sentiment, but surely we can find a more appropriate location." The commissioner's response made Carmichael's jaw clench. He ended the call without pleasantries and turned back to the window. "Get me everything you can find on local ordinances regarding roadside memorials," he barked at his assistant, "and find out who's been feeding that dog. There must be some health code violation we can use." Later that afternoon, Carmichael's black luxury sedan pulled up to the memorial site. He stepped out, his expensive shoes crunching on gravel. Ranger watched him approach, ears forward, body alert but still. "So you're the problem," Carmichael muttered, studying the aging German shepherd. The dog's steady gaze made him uncomfortable. 8 years of blocking progress. Well, that's about to change. He pulled out his phone and took several photos of the site, documenting what he considered violations. The wooden shelter, the water bowls, the scattered toys left by children. His phone rang, and he answered it with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Judge Parker, thank you for returning my call." He paced as he talked, gesturing with his free hand. "Yes, I understand it's an unusual request, but surely there must be some regulation about permanent structures on public land." "I see. No, I appreciate your time." Frustrated, he ended the call and glared at Ranger. The dog hadn't moved, but his eyes tracked every movement Carmichael made. Something about that unwavering stare made the developer's skin crawl. Back in his office, Carmichael met with his legal team. "I don't care what it takes," he said, standing over the seated lawyers. "Find me a way to remove that memorial. Health codes, zoning laws, public safety, whatever angle works." One of the lawyers cleared his throat. "Sir, The county commissioners are firmly against any removal. The site has become something of a local institution. Institutions can be changed, Carmichael snapped. That dog is standing between me and millions in profit. I didn't get where I am by letting obstacles remain in my path. He dismissed the lawyers and sat at his desk, pulling up property records on his computer. The memorial site sat on a small patch of county land, but everything around it belonged to his development company. He had spent years acquiring each piece, building his empire acre by acre. 8 years, he muttered, staring at the site on the map. 8 years of waiting, and for what? He pulled out his phone again, scrolling through his contacts until he found the name he wanted. Time to call in some political favors. The call connected, and Carmichael's tone changed to one of practiced charm. Senator, how are you? Listen, I need your help with a small local matter. Yes, that development we discussed at the fundraiser. There's just one small problem we need to address. As the sun set over Cedar Falls, Carmichael stood once again at his office window. The lights of the town twinkled below, a site he planned to transform with his resort complex. He had built his fortune by removing obstacles, whether they were people, regulations, or traditions. This situation would be no different. Every problem has a solution, he said to his reflection in the darkened glass. It's just a matter of finding the right pressure point. He picked up a framed article from his desk, Cedar Falls Development to Bring Economic Boom, and smiled coldly. That memorial won't be there much longer, and neither will that dog. Rebecca Torres parked her weathered pickup truck at the edge of Highway 84, just as the morning sun painted the Montana sky in soft pinks and golds. She watched Ranger through her windshield, his familiar silhouette a constant fixture against the backdrop of wild grass and distant mountains. The aging German shepherd sat alert at his post, as he had done every day for the past 8 years. With practiced movements, she pulled out a container of fresh food and a bottle of water from her passenger seat. Her veterinarian's eye noted how Ranger's muzzle had grown increasingly gray, how his movements had become stiffer with each passing season. Still, his amber eyes remained bright and watchful. "Morning, old friend," she said softly, approaching the memorial site. Ranger's tail wagged once in recognition, but he maintained his vigilant posture. Rebecca refreshed his water bowl and set down the food container, her hands gentle and efficient. She had perfected this routine over the years, providing care while respecting Ranger's chosen mission. The wooden cross that marked the spot where her brother Frank had died cast a long shadow in the early morning light. Rebecca's throat tightened as she read the simple inscription, Corporal Frank Hutchinson, beloved Marine, friend, and master. The word brother was conspicuously absent. She knelt beside Ranger, running her hands over his coat with professional care, checking for any new health concerns. "You're getting some arthritis in those back legs," she murmured. "We'll need to adjust your supplements." A passing car slowed, and Rebecca recognized Mrs. Peterson from the grocery store. The older woman waved, probably assuming Rebecca was just another community member checking on their town's faithful guardian. Nobody knew the truth, that she was Frank's younger sister, or that every visit to this spot was both a blessing and a torment. As she examined Ranger, memories of her last conversation with Frank flooded back. They had argued in their parents' kitchen, voices rising with years of built-up frustration. "Running away to the Marines won't fix anything," she had shouted. Frank's face had hardened, his words cutting deep. "At least I'm doing something with my life, instead of hiding in this town." Those were the last words they had exchanged. 2 weeks later, he shipped out for basic training. 3 years after that, the accident took his life, leaving only Ranger to guard his final resting place. Rebecca sat on the ground beside the memorial, her work clothes collecting dust. "I check every collar that comes through my clinic," she confessed to Ranger. "Every German shepherd that walks into the animal hospital reminds me of you, of him." Her voice cracked. "I became a vet because of all those strays we used to rescue together, you know, before everything fell apart." Ranger turned his head slightly, his intelligent eyes meeting hers. Sometimes she swore he understood more than any animal should. He had been Frank's military working dog, trained to detect explosives and protect his handler. Now he protected Frank's memory with the same unwavering dedication. "The whole town thinks they know your story," she continued, scratching behind his ears. The loyal dog waiting for his master to return. "But that's not it, is it? You know he's gone. You're guarding something else." She had watched him long enough to recognize the purpose in his vigilance, even if she didn't understand it. A truck rumbled past, and Rebecca quickly wiped her eyes. She had perfected the art of keeping her composure in public, of being Dr. Torres, the competent veterinarian who simply had a soft spot for the town's most famous dog. Nobody knew how she rushed to the accident scene that terrible night, only to arrive too late. How she had stayed hidden at Frank's funeral, watching from a distance as Ranger sat stoically by the casket. "I should have reached out," she whispered, more to herself than to Ranger. "Should have swallowed my pride and called him. Written a letter. Something." She pulled a brush from her medical bag and began grooming Ranger's coat, finding comfort in the routine. "I keep thinking if I take good enough care of you, maybe it makes up for failing him. But it doesn't, does it?" Ranger leaned slightly into her touch, offering what comfort he could while maintaining his watch. Rebecca checked her watch. Almost time to open the clinic. She packed up her supplies and stood brushing dust from her clothes. "Same time tomorrow, old friend," she said, her professional mask sliding back into place. "We'll keep our secrets together, won't we? You guard whatever it is you're protecting, and I'll guard you." As she drove away, Rebecca watched Ranger in her rearview mirror. His figure grew smaller, but no less dignified, a steadfast sentinel whose loyalty had outlasted death. She turned onto Main Street, heading toward her clinic where patients would soon arrive, none of them knowing that their trusted veterinarian carried the weight of an 8-year-old grief and a lifetime of unspoken words. Dexter Carmichael stood at his office window, gazing down at Cedar Falls from his top-floor view. His manicured fingers drummed against the polished mahogany desk as County Commissioner Jenkins shifted uncomfortably in the leather chair across from him. "Safety concerns, Tom. That's what we'll focus on," Carmichael said, his voice smooth as silk. "A wild dog living by a major highway? The liability issues alone should be enough to force action." Jenkins tugged at his collar. "The community sees Ranger differently, Dexter. He's become a symbol of loyalty. Moving that memorial would cause an uproar." Carmichael turned, his expensive suit catching the morning light. "Symbols don't generate tax revenue, Tom. My resort complex will bring jobs, tourism, and progress to Cedar Falls." He slid a folder across the desk. "I've drafted a proposal for relocating the memorial to Pine Grove Cemetery. Much more appropriate." "The county board won't approve this quickly," Jenkins warned. "There are procedures, public hearings, which is why I'm counting on friends like you to help expedite things." Carmichael's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Remember who supported your last campaign." After Jenkins left, Carmichael called his private investigator. "Mike, I need everything you can find on that dog. Who feeds it? Who provides medical care? Nobody survives 8 years without help." 3 days later, Mike Patterson's surveillance photos spread across Carmichael's desk. They showed a dark-haired woman in medical scrubs leaving food and water, checking the dog's health. "Dr. Rebecca Torres," Patterson explained. "Local veterinarian. She visits the memorial site every morning before her clinic opens." "How long has she been doing this?" "Years, from what I can tell. But here's where it gets interesting." Patterson pulled out more documents. "She treats the dog regularly, vaccines, medications, the works. But there's no official record of Ranger as a patient. No owner of record, no proper documentation. That's a violation of state veterinary regulations." Carmichael leaned forward, his cold eyes scanning the evidence. "Professional misconduct, license violations, perfect." He picked up one photo, studying Rebecca's face as she knelt beside Ranger. "What else?" "There's more." Patterson hesitated. Her full name is Rebecca Torres Hutchinson. She's Frank Hutchinson's sister. Carmichael's eyebrows rose. The dead Marine's sister has been secretly caring for his dog all these years? Now that's interesting. He stood, walking to his wall of local maps. The memorial site was marked with a red X. Why keep it secret? Family estrangement, from what I found. They had some falling out before he joined the Marines. She changed her name professionally after moving to Cedar Falls. Find out everything about that estrangement, Carmichael ordered. I want to know every skeleton in Dr. Torres's closet, every violation, every vulnerability. He traced a finger along Highway 84 on the map. The memorial is the heart of this problem. Remove the dog's support system, and nature will take its course. Patterson gathered his photos. The Veterinary Board takes licensing violations seriously. One anonymous complaint could trigger an investigation. Not yet. Carmichael sat back down, steepling his fingers. First, I want to understand exactly what we're dealing with. Keep watching Dr. Torres. Document every violation, every unauthorized treatment. Build me a case that could end her career. His lips curved in a cold smile. When the time comes, I want enough leverage to make her see things my way. He dismissed Patterson and pulled up the resort plans on his computer. The memorial site sat right where the main entrance should be, a constant reminder of his stalled ambitions. 8 years of watching that dog maintain its pointless vigil, becoming a local legend that blocked progress. Carmichael opened his phone and dialed. Tom, schedule that county board meeting. Time to start the official process. He paused, looking at Rebecca's photo again. And get me everything you can about Frank Hutchinson's accident. I want to know exactly what happened that night. The pieces were falling into place. Soon, Dr. Torres would learn the cost of standing in his way. Carmichael smiled as he imagined the memorial site cleared, his resort rising from the Montana soil. The dog would die or disappear, the sister would be silenced, and progress would finally come to Cedar Falls. He picked up the veterinary regulations Patterson had brought, studying the potential violations. One way or another, Rebecca Torres would regret choosing loyalty to a dead brother's dog over cooperation with the future of Cedar Falls. All he needed was time and leverage, and Dexter Carmichael had plenty of both. Rebecca was finishing up her last appointment of the day when her assistant knocked on the exam room door. Dr. Torres, there's someone here to see you. He says it's urgent. I'll be right there. Rebecca gave the elderly golden retriever on her table one final pat. Keep icing that knee twice a day, Mrs. Henderson. He'll be good as new in no time. She walked into the waiting room and froze. Dexter Carmichael stood by the front desk in an immaculate gray suit, his silver hair perfectly styled. His presence felt like a storm cloud in her sunny clinic. Dr. Torres. His smile was practiced, empty. Do you have a moment to discuss a rather delicate matter? Rebecca's heart quickened, but she kept her voice steady. My office is this way. Once inside, Carmichael didn't wait for an invitation to sit. He placed a thick folder on her desk and began spreading out photographs. Rebecca's blood ran cold. There she was, kneeling beside Ranger at the memorial site, giving him vaccines, checking his ears. 8 years of secret care laid bare in glossy color prints. Quite the dedicated veterinarian, Carmichael said. Though I notice there's no official record of these treatments, no owner authorization, no proper documentation. He tapped one photo. The veterinary board takes such violations very seriously. Rebecca gripped the back of her chair. You've been spying on me? Let's call it due diligence. That memorial site is blocking an important development project. I needed to understand who's been enabling that dog's continued presence. His cold eyes fixed on her. Or should I say your brother's dog? The room seemed to tilt. Rebecca sank into her chair. How did you? Rebecca Torres Hutchinson, Frank's little sister. Carmichael leaned forward. Tell me, why keep it secret all these years? Ashamed of the family connection? Or is there more to the story? My relationship with Frank is none of your business, Rebecca said, her voice shaking. Neither is my care for Ranger. Everything in Cedar Falls is my business, Dr. Torres, especially obstacles to progress. He pulled out a document. The Veterinary Board would be very interested in these licensing violations. One phone call could trigger an investigation that would destroy your practice. Rebecca's hands clenched in her lap. Are you threatening me? I'm offering you a chance to be reasonable. Help me solve this problem. That dog needs to be removed and the memorial relocated. You're in a unique position to make that happen. You want me to betray Ranger? Help you capture him? Carmichael sighed. He's a dog, Dr. Torres. An old, confused animal maintaining a pointless vigil. You're risking your career, your livelihood, to protect what? A stray that can't let go of the past? Ranger isn't confused, Rebecca said, anger rising in her throat. He's loyal, something you clearly wouldn't understand. Loyalty? Carmichael's voice hardened. Like the loyalty you showed your brother before he died. I wonder what Frank would think about his sister hiding in the shadows all these years, too ashamed to claim her own family name. The words hit like a physical blow. Rebecca stood, trembling. Get out of my clinic. Think carefully about your next move, Dr. Torres. I have the resources to make your life very difficult. The Veterinary Board investigation would just be the beginning. I won't help you hurt Ranger or destroy that memorial, Rebecca said. No matter what you threaten. Carmichael gathered his photos unhurriedly. You're choosing a dog over your own future. Very well. He walked to the door, then turned back. You've just made an enemy of a very powerful man, Dr. Torres. I built this town. I own half the county board. When I want something removed, it gets removed. Is that what happened to my brother? The words slipped out before Rebecca could stop them. Carmichael's face went completely still. Careful, Doctor. Some questions are dangerous to ask. He straightened his tie. You have 24 hours to reconsider my offer. After that, things will become very unpleasant for you. The door clicked shut behind him. Rebecca slumped in her chair, her whole body shaking. She looked at the photos still scattered across her desk. 8 years of secret morning visits, of caring for Ranger while hiding her true connection to him. Her last argument with Frank played through her mind, the horrible words they'd hurled at each other before he enlisted. She'd never gotten to apologize, never got to make it right. Now this man threatened to destroy everything she'd built here, all because Ranger's faithful vigil stood in the way of his profits. She picked up one of the photos, touching Ranger's graying face. The old dog had never wavered in his dedication to Frank's memory. How could she do any less? Rebecca gathered the photos and locked them in her desk. Whatever Carmichael planned to do, she wouldn't abandon Ranger. She owed her brother that much, and more. But Carmichael's parting words echoed in her mind. What had he meant about dangerous questions? For the first time in 8 years, she found herself wondering if there was more to Frank's accident than she knew. Rebecca couldn't sleep that night. She tossed and turned, Carmichael's threats echoing in her mind. When her alarm buzzed at 5:30 in the morning, she was already dressed and heading to her clinic. She needed to prepare Ranger's morning food and medications before checking on him at the memorial site. The phone rang just as she finished packing her supplies. Doctor, Torres speaking. Rebecca, thank goodness you're there. It was Linda from the county clerk's office, her voice hushed and worried. I had to call you right away. Something's happening with Ranger. Rebecca's hand tightened on the phone. What do you mean? Dexter Carmichael was here yesterday afternoon, right after he left your clinic. He had a long meeting with Vince Kowalski from Animal Control. Rebecca's stomach dropped. Everyone in Cedar Falls knew about Vince Kowalski. He'd been investigated twice for suspicious deaths of impounded animals, but Carmichael's influence had kept him in his position. That's not all, Linda continued, her voice dropping even lower. I overheard them talking about declaring Ranger a public menace. They're planning to bypass the normal hearing process. Once Kowalski files the paperwork, they can seize him immediately. Rebecca, they're going to put him down." The room spun. Rebecca gripped her desk for support. "They can't do that. There has to be a public complaint, an investigation." Kowalski's falsifying reports right now, claims he's received multiple complaints about aggressive behavior. Once he submits them, it'll be too late to fight it legally. Linda paused. "I'm sorry, Rebecca. I know how much you care about that dog." "When?" Rebecca's voice cracked. "When are they moving on this?" "The paperwork's being filed this morning. Kowalski said he'd handle it personally by the end of the day." Rebecca checked her watch. 6:15. "Thank you, Linda. I owe you one." "Be careful, Rebecca. Carmichael doesn't play fair, and Kowalski's even worse." After hanging up, Rebecca ran to her supply room. Her hands shook as she gathered sedatives, syringes, and basic medical supplies. She had no plan yet, but she knew she needed options. The thought of Kowalski getting his hands on Ranger made her sick. She threw everything into her truck and sped toward the memorial site. The sun was just rising over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Ranger was there as always, his gray muzzle resting on his paws as he maintained his faithful watch. "Hey, boy." Rebecca knelt beside him, her heart aching. Ranger's tail thumped against the ground as she scratched behind his ears. "We've got trouble coming." She pulled out her phone and started making calls. First to the local animal sanctuary. They were already at capacity. Then to rescue organizations in neighboring counties. None could take him without proper documentation. Her veterinary colleagues all gave the same response. With Kowalski involved, their hands were tied. "There has to be somewhere," she whispered, watching Ranger nose at the bag of food she'd brought. The old dog moved stiffly, his joints showing the wear of 8 years of outdoor living. Yet his eyes remained bright and alert, fixed on the curve of highway where Frank's car had gone off the road. A police cruiser rolled past, slowing slightly. Rebecca recognized Officer Martinez, who gave her a subtle nod. At least some of the local police were sympathetic to Ranger's situation. But they couldn't stop Kowalski once he had the official paperwork. Rebecca checked her watch again. 8:30. Time was running out. She couldn't take Ranger to her clinic. That would be the first place they'd look. Her house wasn't safe either. She needed somewhere off the grid, somewhere Carmichael and Kowalski wouldn't think to search. Her phone buzzed with a text from Linda. Kowalski filed the papers. He's getting his gear ready. Rebecca's hands curled into fists. She couldn't let them kill Ranger, not just because he was Frank's dog, but because his unwavering loyalty represented something pure and good in a world where men like Carmichael and Kowalski twisted the rules to serve their greed. She looked at the memorial site, the weather-worn cross, the faded flowers, the small American flag that someone regularly replaced. Ranger had protected this spot for 8 years. Now it was her turn to protect him. "Come on, boy," she said softly, pulling out a leash. "We need to move you somewhere safe until I can figure this out." Ranger looked at her with trusting eyes, but didn't move from his spot. He never left willingly. That's why all previous attempts to adopt him had failed. Rebecca felt tears welling up as she realized what she might have to do. The sedatives in her bag would make it easier to transport him, but using them felt like a betrayal. She stroked Ranger's graying fur, watching the morning traffic speed past on Highway 84. Somewhere out there, she had to find a safe haven for this loyal old soldier. She just prayed she could do it before Kowalski arrived with his falsified papers and deadly intentions. Thunder crackled overhead as Rebecca double-checked the supplies in her truck. The clock on her dashboard read 11:15 at night. Rain drummed against the metal roof while she reviewed her hastily made checklist. Blankets, food, water, medical supplies, and enough sedatives to keep Ranger calm during the long drive ahead. She'd found a sanctuary 6 hours north, deep in the Canadian wilderness. The owner, a retired military veteran, had agreed to take Ranger after hearing his story. No questions asked. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was Ranger's only chance of survival now. Lightning split the sky as Rebecca drove toward Highway 84. The storm had cleared the roads of traffic, leaving her alone with the rhythmic swish of windshield wipers and the rumble of distant thunder. Her headlights caught the glint of rain-slicked asphalt as she approached the memorial site. Through the downpour, she could make out Ranger's familiar shape. The old German Shepherd huddled beneath a small wooden overhang some kind locals had built years ago to shelter him. Even in this weather, he maintained his vigil. "Oh, Ranger," Rebecca whispered, pulling over and grabbing her raincoat. "Please let me help you this time." She stepped out into the deluge, immediately soaked despite her protection. The wind whipped her hair around her face as she approached Ranger with slow, careful movements. "Hey, boy." She kept her voice gentle, reaching into her pocket for the treats she'd brought. "Look what I have for you." Ranger's tail wagged slightly, but he didn't move from his spot. His amber eyes watched her carefully, reflecting the occasional flash of lightning. Rebecca knelt beside him, ignoring the mud soaking through her jeans. "I know you don't want to leave," she said softly. "I know you're waiting for Frank, but he wouldn't want you to die here, boy. He'd want you safe." She held out her hand, letting Ranger sniff the treats. The old dog took them gently, but still wouldn't budge from his position. Rebecca felt tears mixing with the rain on her face. The thought of sedating him felt like a betrayal, but she was running out of options. A car's headlights swept across the memorial site. Rebecca's heart jumped as she recognized the black SUV pulling over behind her truck. Carmichael. The developer stepped out, sheltered beneath a large black umbrella. "I had a feeling you'd try something tonight," he called over the storm's fury. "My sources saw you making calls to sanctuaries up north." Rebecca stood, positioning herself between Carmichael and Ranger. "You're not getting anywhere near him." "Don't be naive, Dr. Torres." Carmichael's expensive shoes squelched in the mud as he approached. "That mud is coming down one way or another. Kowalski will be here at dawn with the paperwork. Why make this harder than it needs to be?" "This isn't about the dog, is it?" Rebecca felt anger rising in her chest. "This is about the land. It's always been about the land." Lightning flashed, illuminating Carmichael's cold smile. "Everything's about land in the end, Doctor. That memorial is standing between me and millions in development profits. Your brother's dead. Let it go." The casual cruelty of his words hit Rebecca like a physical blow. Behind her, Ranger growled low in his throat, a sound she'd never heard from him before. "Frank died trying to expose people like you," she said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "He told me about the corruption he'd discovered right before." She stopped, realizing she'd said too much. Carmichael's expression sharpened. "Before what, Doctor? Torres? Before his unfortunate accident?" Another vehicle approached, its high beams cutting through the rain. Rebecca recognized Kowalski's animal control truck. Her heart sank. He wasn't supposed to be here until morning. "You're early, Vince," Carmichael called out as Kowalski parked. "But good timing." The animal control officer emerged carrying a catch pole, its metal loop glinting in the darkness. "Thought I'd get a head start," he said, grinning. "Storm like this, nobody around to see anything." Rebecca reached for her phone, but Carmichael was faster. He grabbed her wrist, his grip painfully tight. "Don't make this messier than it has to be." The pain and fear must have shown in her voice, because Ranger suddenly lunged forward, placing himself between Rebecca and Carmichael. The old dog's hackles were raised, his teeth bared in a snarl that transformed him from a grieving companion back into the military service dog he'd once been. Carmichael released Rebecca and stepped back, his composure cracking slightly. "Handle this, Kowalski." The animal control officer advanced with his catch pole, but Ranger's growl deepened. Rebecca saw her chance. She whistled sharply, a command she'd heard Frank use years ago. Ranger responded instantly, backing toward her while keeping his eyes on the two men. For the first time in 8 years, he seemed ready to leave his post. "Good boy," Rebecca whispered, reaching for him. Come on now. Come with me. Thunder boomed directly overhead, and the memorial site erupted into chaos. Through sheets of rain, Rebecca fumbled with her truck's door handle, her hands trembling. Come on, Ranger. Get in, boy. The German Shepherd hesitated for just a moment before leaping into the passenger seat, his first time leaving his post in 8 years. Kowalski's voice cut through the storm. Stop right there, Torres! The animal control officer raised his tranquilizer gun, its barrel glinting in the lightning. Rebecca slammed her door shut just as a dart pinged off the metal. She cranked the engine and threw the truck into drive, tires spinning in the mud before finding purchase. In her rearview mirror, she saw Kowalski scrambling back to his vehicle while Carmichael shouted orders into a phone. Hold on, boy, she told Ranger, who sat alertly in the passenger seat, water dripping from his gray-flecked coat. The old dog's eyes were fixed ahead, as if he understood the gravity of their situation. 2 sets of headlights appeared behind them as Rebecca's truck fishtailed onto Highway 84. Kowalski's animal control van led the pursuit, followed by what looked like a county sheriff's vehicle, no doubt called in by Carmichael's connections. The storm intensified, rain hammering against the windshield so hard Rebecca could barely see 20 feet ahead. Lightning flashed continuously, turning night into stuttering day. She gripped the steering wheel with white knuckles, trying to keep the truck steady on the increasingly flooded road. Attention, driver, a voice boomed over a loudspeaker. Pull over immediately. This is the Cedar Falls Sheriff's Department. Rebecca checked her mirrors again. 3 vehicles now, the animal control van, the sheriff's car, and a black SUV she recognized as Carmichael's. They were gaining on her, their higher-powered engines cutting through the storm more efficiently than her old truck. A flash flood warning crackled over her radio. Rebecca switched it off, needing to focus. She knew these back roads better than most. She'd spent years driving them on emergency vet calls. Up ahead was an old logging road that could give them a chance. She yanked the wheel hard right, nearly missing the turn. The truck bounced violently as they hit the unpaved surface. Ranger braced himself against the dashboard, staying remarkably calm despite the chaos. Good boy, Rebecca said through gritted teeth. We're going to make it. The logging road was already turning into a muddy river. Rebecca's truck slipped and slid, but she kept it moving forward. In her mirrors, she saw the sheriff's car fall back, unable to handle the terrain. But Kowalski's van and Carmichael's SUV pressed on. Thunder crashed directly overhead as they crested a hill. Rebecca's headlights revealed a section of road ahead that had partially washed away. She had seconds to decide: try to cross it or turn back into the arms of their pursuers. Hold tight, Ranger. She pressed the gas pedal to the floor. The truck hit the damaged section at 40 miles per hour. For a terrifying moment, they were airborne. Rebecca's stomach lurched as they landed hard on the other side, the impact jarring every bone in her body. Looking back, she saw Kowalski's van attempt the same crossing. It didn't make it. The van's front wheels caught the edge of the washout, bringing it to a sudden stop. Carmichael's SUV skidded to a halt behind it. Rebecca allowed herself a moment of relief before realizing their problems weren't over. The logging road was deteriorating rapidly in the storm. Mud and debris flowed across their path, and fallen branches appeared suddenly in her headlights. She swerved to avoid a massive tree limb, sending them dangerously close to the road's edge. The shoulder crumbled beneath their right wheels. Rebecca overcorrected, and the truck spun completely around before she could regain control. Ranger whined, his first sound since they'd started running. Rebecca glanced over and saw him staring intently at something through the passenger window. Following his gaze, she spotted a narrow fire access road she'd never noticed before. You want me to turn there, boy? The dog's ears perked up. Rebecca didn't hesitate. Ranger's instincts had kept him alive for 8 years. She took the turn, finding the new road narrower but more stable than the logging track. They drove for several minutes through dense forest, the truck's headlights their only illumination. The sound of pursuit had faded, replaced by the steady drumming of rain and the occasional rumble of thunder. Rebecca's hands were cramping from gripping the steering wheel so tightly. Her clothes were soaked through, and her heart wouldn't stop racing. But beside her, Ranger seemed more alert and purposeful than she'd seen him in years. "You know where we're going, don't you?" she asked him. The old dog's tail wagged once, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. It struck Rebecca that this wasn't just a random escape route. Ranger was leading her somewhere specific. The fire road curved sharply around a hillside, then opened onto a small clearing. Rebecca slowed the truck to a stop, realizing they'd reached some kind of old ranger station. The building was abandoned, its windows dark, but it looked solid enough to provide shelter from the storm. More importantly, they appeared to have lost their pursuers. But Rebecca knew they couldn't stay long. Carmichael would have patrols searching every road by morning. They needed to rest briefly, then find another route north to the sanctuary. As she turned off the engine, Ranger became increasingly agitated, pawing at the door handle. There was something about this place that had him excited, something more than just escape from danger. The old ranger station disappeared into the darkness behind them as Rebecca followed Ranger's urgent signals to continue down the fire road. The storm's intensity hadn't lessened, and her wipers could barely keep up with the deluge. Through the streaming windshield, she caught glimpses of the ground dropping away sharply on their right side. "Easy, boy," she murmured as Ranger grew increasingly restless. "We need to be careful on this road." A blinding flash of lightning revealed what her headlights couldn't. The road ahead had completely washed away, leaving a gaping hole in their path. Rebecca slammed on the brakes, but the truck's tires found no traction on the mud-slick surface. They skidded forward, the steering wheel useless in her hands. Time seemed to slow as the truck's front wheels met empty air. Rebecca's stomach lurched as gravity took hold. She reached for Ranger, trying to hold him steady as the vehicle tipped forward and began to roll. The world spun violently around them, metal crunching and glass shattering as they tumbled down the steep embankment. When the truck finally came to rest, it was on its side in what had become a rapidly filling ravine. Cold water was already seeping in through the broken windows. Rebecca's head throbbed where it had struck the steering wheel, and her left arm screamed in pain when she tried to move it. "Ranger?" she called out frantically. A whimper from the back of the cab answered her. The German Shepherd had somehow been thrown into the small space behind the seats during the crash. He was alive, but trapped by the crushed metal of the roof. Rebecca tried her door, but it was jammed tight. The passenger side was pressed against the ravine wall, leaving them no escape route. Water continued rising steadily around them, already reaching her waist as she sat strapped in her seat. Through the cracked windshield, she could see the rain-swollen creek that ran through the ravine was becoming a raging torrent. The truck groaned as the current pushed against it, threatening to drag them deeper into the floodwaters. "Help!" she screamed, though she knew it was futile. The storm would drown out any calls for assistance. She fumbled with her seatbelt, finally managing to release it. But there was nowhere to go. The rising water had reached her chest. Ranger whined again, more urgently this time. Rebecca twisted around, ignoring the sharp pain in her arm, and reached back to touch him. His fur was soaked, but she could feel him trembling. "I'm so sorry, boy," she choked out, tears mixing with the rainwater on her face. "I was trying to save you, and now—" She couldn't finish the thought. The beam of a spotlight suddenly cut through the darkness from above. "Torres!" Kowalski's voice echoed down the ravine. "Can you hear me?" "Down here," Rebecca shouted back. "We're trapped." She could make out multiple figures at the top of the ravine, their flashlights dancing across the water. The animal control van's lights illuminated the scene in harsh white glare. "Hang on," someone called. "We're getting a rope." But Rebecca could see the water rising faster than any rescue attempt could reach them. It was up to her neck now, forcing her to tilt her head back to keep her face above the surface. Ranger paddled in the small air pocket behind her, his breathing becoming more labored. "The current's too strong," she heard Kowalski shout to someone above. "We can't get down there safely." The truck shifted suddenly, metal screaming as the floodwaters pulled at it. More water rushed in, leaving only inches of airspace near the roof. Rebecca reached back and pulled Ranger closer, holding him up as best she could with her good arm. "It's okay," she whispered to him, though they both were shaking violently from the cold. "You've been such a good boy, such a faithful friend to Frank." The water lapped at her chin. "I wish I'd been half as loyal a sister." Ranger's eyes met hers in the darkness, filled with an intelligence that seemed almost human. Despite their dire situation, he wasn't panicking. Instead, he kept trying to push himself toward the back corner of the cab, as if he was trying to tell her something. The water rose inexorably. Rebecca could hear the rescue team shouting above them, but their voices were growing fainter as the roar of the floodwaters increased. The current rocked the truck again, threatening to tear it loose from where it was wedged. "Please," she prayed, holding Ranger tighter as the last few inches of airspace began to disappear. "Please don't let it end like this." The truck groaned one final time as the water completely filled the cab. Rebecca held her breath, still clinging to Ranger, as the dark water closed over their heads. The last thing she saw before everything went black was the old dog's eyes, still calm and purposeful, even in what seemed to be their final moments together. Above them, Kowalski and his team worked desperately to find a way down the ravine, but the storm-swept hillside offered no safe approach. They could only watch helplessly as the floodwaters continued to rise around the wreckage of Rebecca's truck. Through the darkness and rising water, Rebecca felt Ranger suddenly tug away from her grip. Her heart leaped into her throat, thinking he was being pulled under by the current. But instead of panic, she saw determination in the old dog's movements. He was swimming with purpose, fighting against the floodwaters toward the ravine wall. "Ranger!" she called out, her voice barely audible over the storm. The German shepherd barked back, not a sound of distress, but the sharp, commanding bark she'd heard him use during their escape. Following his lead was their only option now. Rebecca pushed off from the truck, her injured arm screaming in protest. The current immediately tried to sweep her downstream, but she managed to grab onto exposed tree roots along the ravine wall. The water was chest deep here, but she could just touch bottom with her feet. Ranger had already reached a spot about 15 feet from the wreck. He started pawing frantically at the muddy bank, whining with an urgency she'd never heard before. This wasn't random panic. He was trying to show her something. "What is it, boy?" Rebecca struggled closer, fighting against the current. Lightning flashed overhead, illuminating Ranger's desperate digging. The spot he'd chosen seemed oddly specific, just below where their original memorial marker had stood all these years. Understanding hit her like a thunderbolt. "Frank," she whispered, "you were never just waiting, were you? You were guarding something." Using her good arm, Rebecca began digging alongside Ranger. The mud was loose from the rain, but the work was still difficult in the rushing water. Her fingers scraped against rocks and roots as she dug deeper, spurred on by Ranger's increasing excitement. Come on," she muttered through chattering teeth. The water was rising steadily around them, already reaching her shoulders. Above, she could hear Kowalski's team still trying to figure out a rescue plan, but their voices seemed very far away. Suddenly, her hand struck something solid. Not a rock, but something smooth and artificial. Ranger barked sharply, confirming she'd found what he'd been protecting all these years. Rebecca dug more frantically now, ignoring the pain as her fingers finally closed around what felt like a handle. With one tremendous effort, she yanked the object free from the mud. It was a military-grade waterproof case, about the size of a small briefcase. The security latches were still intact, protecting whatever Frank had hidden inside from 8 years of exposure. A massive surge of water hit them just then, nearly tearing the case from Rebecca's grasp. She clutched it to her chest with her good arm while grabbing onto the roots with her injured one, crying out from the pain, but refusing to let go of either lifeline. Ranger pressed against her, helping to anchor her against the current. His body provided just enough additional support to keep them both from being swept away. The old dog's strength and determination amazed her. Even now, he was still carrying out his mission. "Hold on!" a voice called from above. A rope snaked down through the darkness, landing just within reach. Rebecca looped it around her waist one-handed, never letting go of the case. She then grabbed Ranger's collar, making sure he was secure against her. "We've got you!" multiple voices shouted. "Hang on tight!" The pull of the rope nearly tore her arm from its socket, but Rebecca held firm to both Ranger and the case as they were slowly dragged up the ravine wall. Hands reached down to help them over the edge, pulling them to safety just as another surge of water crashed through the ravine below. Rebecca collapsed onto the muddy ground, still hugging the waterproof case while Ranger pressed against her side, both of them shaking violently. Kowalski stood over them, his face a mix of disbelief and confusion. "What the hell were you two doing down there?" he demanded. "You nearly got yourselves killed." Rebecca didn't answer. Instead, she focused on the latches of the case, her trembling fingers struggling to release them. When the lid finally opened, she gasped. Inside, protected from years of weather and water, lay Frank's military medals carefully arranged. Beneath them were bundles of letters and documents, all sealed in waterproof bags. But what caught Rebecca's eye was a small USB drive, also carefully waterproofed and labeled with her brother's precise handwriting. Evidence: Carmichael corruption. "Oh my God," she whispered, looking at Ranger with new understanding. "This is what you've been protecting. This is why Frank was out here that night." The old dog's tail wagged once, his eyes never leaving the case. Kowalski stepped closer, trying to see what she'd found, but Ranger moved between them with a low growl. The animal control officer stepped back, raising his hands. "Easy there," he said, his tone noticeably different now. "Maybe we should all get somewhere dry and warm before we do anything else." Rebecca nodded slowly, clutching the case closer. "Yes," she said. "But first, I need to make a phone call to the FBI office in Helena." She looked directly at Kowalski. "I think they're going to be very interested in what my brother left behind." Ranger sat at attention beside her, his posture proud despite his exhaustion. After 8 long years, his vigil was finally complete. He had protected Frank's final message until it could be delivered safely into the right hands. The wail of approaching sirens cut through the storm's fury as emergency vehicles converged on the rescue site. Local residents who had witnessed the wild chase through town had called 911, worried about Rebecca and the beloved dog they'd watched over for so many years. Rebecca sat in the back of an ambulance, wrapped in a thick blanket with Ranger pressed against her legs. The waterproof case remained clutched tightly in her arms, despite the paramedics' gentle attempts to examine her injured shoulder. She wouldn't let it go, not after what it had cost to retrieve it. "Miss Torres, we really should get you to the hospital," the paramedic insisted, concerned about her shivering. "Just a few minutes," Rebecca pleaded. "I need to check something first." She pulled her tablet from her rescue bag, thankfully still working in its waterproof case. Her hands trembled as she carefully extracted the USB drive from Frank's container. Ranger's ears perked up as she handled the drive, his eyes fixed on the small device as if he understood its importance. Rebecca scratched behind his ears with her good hand. "You knew all along, didn't you, boy? You weren't just waiting for Frank. You were protecting his last message." The tablet recognized the drive immediately. Rebecca's breath caught as she saw dozens of folders appear on the screen, all meticulously organized in her brother's characteristic style. The first folder was labeled "Read Me First, Evidence Summary." She opened it with shaking fingers and began to read. "To whom it may concern. My name is Corporal Frank Hutchinson, United States Marine Corps. I am documenting a pattern of corruption and illegal activities centered around Cedar Falls land developer Dexter Carmichael." Rebecca's eyes widened as she continued reading. The document detailed how Frank had stumbled onto Carmichael's schemes while helping elderly neighbors review suspicious property contracts. What he discovered led him to launch his own investigation. Page after page revealed Carmichael's methods, bribing county officials to change zoning laws, using shell companies to hide his true ownership of properties, and most disturbing, threatening families who refused to sell. Frank had gathered bank records, recorded conversations, and photographs documenting it all. "Oh, Frank," Rebecca whispered, tears streaming down her face. "This is what you were doing all those months when you seemed so distant." The guilt she'd carried about their last argument twisted painfully in her chest. She'd accused him of abandoning their family values, of becoming cold and secretive. Now she understood. He'd been protecting people, fighting corruption just as he'd done in the Marines. She opened another folder labeled Threats. Inside were dozens of emails and transcribed phone conversations. Carmichael's voice emerged clearly in them, making thinly veiled threats against elderly residents who refused his lowball offers. "Accidents happen to people who don't know what's good for them," he'd said in one recording. Rebecca's hands began to shake harder as she opened a folder marked Meeting, FBIAGENTPETERSON. The final entry was dated the day before Frank died. It was a confirmed appointment to meet with federal investigators the following afternoon, a meeting he never made it to. "It wasn't an accident," she said aloud, her voice breaking. Ranger whined softly and pressed his head against her leg. "Your crash wasn't an accident at all, was it, Frank?" The paramedic touched her shoulder gently. "Miss Torres, you're in shock. Please, let us take you to the hospital now." But Rebecca barely heard him. She was opening another folder, this one containing detailed maps of Carmichael's property holdings around Cedar Falls. The spot where Frank had crashed, where Ranger had maintained his years-long vigil, was marked in red. It was a crucial connecting point between two major parcels of Carmichael's planned resort development. The same spot where Carmichael was now trying to force the removal of Frank's memorial. A police officer approached the ambulance, his rain gear dripping. "Ma'am, we've got FBI agents from the Helena office on their way. They're very interested in what you've found." Rebecca nodded, still staring at the screen. "Tell them to hurry. Tell them." Her voice caught as she opened one final document, Frank's last recorded notes. "Tell them I have evidence that Dexter Carmichael didn't just corrupt our town. I think he murdered my brother to cover it up." Ranger stood up suddenly, his posture alert. Through the rain and emergency lights, Rebecca could see several black SUVs pulling up to the scene. Men in FBI windbreakers were already jumping out, moving with urgent purpose. She hugged Ranger close, burying her face in his wet fur. "You did it, boy. You protected Frank's evidence until the right people could find it." The old dog's tail wagged slowly as he maintained his protective stance beside her. The truth of her brother's final days was still sinking in. Frank hadn't abandoned their family's values. He'd been living them more deeply than she'd ever understood. While she'd judged him for growing distant, he'd been risking his life to protect their community from corruption and greed. All these years, she'd carried the weight of their unresolved argument, the bitter words they'd never gotten to take back. Now she knew that Frank had died a hero, trying to expose the truth, and his faithful companion had completed his mission, guarding that truth through 8 long years of rain and snow, heat and cold, never wavering from his post until the evidence could finally be delivered. The FBI agents were approaching the ambulance now, but Rebecca needed one more moment. She pressed her forehead against Ranger's, whispering words meant only for him. "Thank you for helping me understand. Thank you for showing me who Frank really was." Ranger licked her cheek once, then sat at attention as the federal agents drew near. His posture seemed to say that while one mission was complete, he wasn't finished protecting her. Not yet. Not while there was still justice to be served for the master he'd loved so faithfully. The federal agents worked quickly and efficiently in the pre-dawn hours, setting up a command center in the local sheriff's office. Rebecca sat in a warm conference room, still wrapped in a blanket, with Ranger dozing at her feet. Her hands curved around a steaming cup of coffee as she walked the FBI team through the contents of Frank's USB drive. "Your brother was thorough," Special Agent Sarah Peterson remarked, her eyes scanning through the files on a laptop. "He documented everything, Bank transfers, recorded conversations, photographs. The corruption goes deeper than we initially suspected. Rebecca watched as more agents rushed past the conference room windows, coordinating with local law enforcement. Frank always was detail-oriented, she said softly. Even when we were kids, he needed everything to be just right. Agent Peterson nodded, her fingers flying across the keyboard. These records show Carmichael's been bribing county officials for nearly a decade. Zoning changes, building permits, environmental surveys, all manipulated to benefit his developments. The evidence was overwhelming. Frank had captured everything: secret meetings in parking lots, envelope handoffs in restaurants, threatening phone calls to elderly residents. He'd even documented how Carmichael used shell companies to hide his true ownership of properties, making it impossible for owners to negotiate fair prices. "We're moving now," Agent Peterson announced, standing up as her phone buzzed. "Multiple arrest teams are in position. We can't risk giving them time to destroy evidence or flee." Rebecca straightened in her chair. "What about Kowalski?" "He tried to." Her voice caught as she remembered the terrifying chase through the storm. "Animal Control Officer Kowalski is already in custody," Peterson assured her. "We picked him up at the crash site. He's eager to talk, hoping for a deal. Says he can prove Carmichael ordered him to eliminate both you and Ranger tonight." Ranger's ears perked up at his name, and Rebecca reached down to scratch his head. "He saved us both," she said. "If he hadn't led me to that evidence." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Rebecca watched through the station windows as police cars and FBI vehicles rolled out into the lightening dawn. Reports crackled over radios as arrests were made across Cedar Falls and the surrounding county. The biggest operation targeted Carmichael's mansion on the outskirts of town. He'd apparently been monitoring the night's events through his security network and was attempting to flee when agents arrived. They found him trying to delete files from his computer and shred documents, but it was too late. Frank's evidence had given them everything they needed. By mid-morning, the conference room table was covered with evidence bags and documentation. Agent Peterson returned, looking tired but satisfied. 12 arrests so far, she reported. 3 county commissioners, the zoning board chairman, 2 bank executives who helped launder the money, and several of Carmichael's key associates. "And Carmichael himself?" Rebecca asked. "In federal custody," Peterson confirmed. "He's not talking, but he doesn't need to." "Your brother's evidence tells the whole story." She paused, her expression softening. "There's something else you should know. We found documents at Carmichael's house, records about your brother's accident." Rebecca's heart clenched. Ranger, sensing her distress, pressed against her legs. "It wasn't an accident, was it?" Peterson shook her head. Carmichael had discovered Frank was investigating him. He hired someone to tamper with Frank's brakes. We have the payment records, and we're closing in on the mechanic who did it. She met Rebecca's eyes. "We're adding first-degree murder charges to the indictment." Rebecca closed her eyes, tears sliding down her cheeks. All these years, she'd thought Frank had simply lost control in bad weather. To learn that he'd been murdered, that the man responsible had spent 8 years trying to erase even the memory of him. "The development project?" she asked, wiping her eyes. "Permanently halted," Peterson assured her. "The county's placing a moratorium on all new development applications until a complete audit can be performed. The land around the memorial site will be preserved." Rebecca looked down at Ranger, who gazed back with those same steady, faithful eyes that had watched over Frank's final resting place for 8 years. "You weren't just waiting for him to come back, were you, boy?" she whispered. "You were guarding his last mission, making sure the truth would come out." Agent Peterson smiled at the old dog. "Military working dogs are incredible animals. Frank must have shown Ranger where he buried that evidence, knowing he could be trusted to protect it." "And he did," Rebecca said softly. "Through every season, every storm, he never gave up." The agent gathered her files, preparing to leave. "We'll need you to make a formal statement later, but for now, get some rest. You've both earned it." She paused at the door. "Your brother was a hero, Miss Torres." He died trying to protect this community from corruption and greed. Thanks to his loyalty and Ranger's, justice is finally being served. Rebecca stayed in her chair long after Peterson left, one hand resting on Ranger's head. Outside the window, she could see news vans arriving, reporters gathering as word of the arrests spread through town. Soon, everyone would know the truth about Frank's death, about the corruption he'd fought to expose, about the faithful dog who had guarded his final message for so long. Ranger shifted, laying his head in her lap with a soft whine. For the first time in 8 years, he seemed truly at peace, as if he knew his long vigil was finally complete. His master's last mission was accomplished. The truth was out. Justice would be served. "Come on, boy," Rebecca said, standing up. "Let's go home." Ranger rose and followed her toward the door, but not before casting one last look at the evidence bags on the table, the proof of Frank's courage and sacrifice that he had protected for so long. Then he turned and walked beside Rebecca, ready to begin a new chapter in both their lives, knowing that Frank's memory would now be honored not just as a fallen veteran, but as a hero who gave his life fighting for justice. 3 months after Carmichael's arrest, the autumn air carried the scent of pine needles and fresh-cut grass across the newly designated Frank Hutchinson Veterans Memorial Park. Workers were setting up rows of white folding chairs on the emerald lawn, preparing for the afternoon's dedication ceremony. A gleaming granite monument stood at the center, etched with Frank's image and the words "In honor of those who served." Rebecca stood at the edge of the construction, watching as volunteers hung banners and arranged flowers. Ranger sat beside her, his gray muzzle lifted to catch the morning breeze. He looked different now, healthier, with a glossy coat and bright eyes. The old German Shepherd wore a new blue service vest, embroidered with Veterans Support Foundation in gold thread. "It's really happening," she whispered, reaching down to scratch behind his ears. After 8 years of maintaining his solitary vigil, Ranger had finally found a new purpose. The adoption papers had been signed last month, making official what everyone in town already knew. He had a real home now. Senator Margaret Chen approached them, clipboard in hand. As the driving force behind the federal intervention that had protected the land, she had become a strong ally in establishing the Memorial Park. "Everything's on schedule for the 2 o'clock ceremony," the senator said, smiling warmly. "The VA representatives are already here, and we're expecting at least 200 veterans and their families to attend." Rebecca nodded, her throat tight with emotion. Frank would have loved this. He always wanted to help other veterans, even before he enlisted. "That's exactly what the foundation will do," Senator Chen assured her. "The funding is secured, and we've already had dozens of veterans reach out about the therapy dog program." The Frank Hutchinson Veterans Support Foundation had come together quickly after Carmichael's arrest. With the senator's help, Rebecca had secured federal grants and private donations to establish a comprehensive support network for local veterans. The cornerstone of their program was something special, a therapy dog initiative inspired by Ranger himself. Throughout the morning, more people arrived to help with the preparations. Many were veterans who had watched over Ranger during his years of waiting, leaving food and water, keeping him safe. Now they worked alongside civilian volunteers, setting up information booths about veteran services and mental health resources. Around noon, Rebecca walked Ranger to her truck to get ready for the ceremony. In the passenger seat was a garment bag containing her new navy blue blazer with the foundation's logo. As she changed, she caught sight of herself in the rearview mirror. The tired, guilt-ridden look she'd carried for so long had been replaced by something different. Purpose, maybe, or peace. "We're doing good work, aren't we, boy?" she said to Ranger. He wagged his tail in response, already wearing his own formal vest for the occasion. By 1:30, the park was filled with people. Veterans in uniform mingled with families and local residents. Near the monument, a group of German Shepherd puppies in training vests played under the watchful eye of their handlers, the first class of the Foundation's therapy dog program. At precisely 2 o'clock, the ceremony began. Senator Chen spoke about Frank's service and sacrifice, about the corruption he'd fought to expose, and about the faithful dog who had protected his final mission. Other speakers followed, veterans who had known Frank, local officials who had helped establish the foundation, even a federal agent who had worked on Carmichael's case. Finally, it was Rebecca's turn to speak. She walked to the podium with Ranger at her side, facing the crowd of familiar faces. Her prepared speech lay before her, but as she looked out at the gathering, different words came to her heart. "For 8 years, I carried the weight of my last argument with Frank," she began, her voice clear and steady. "I thought I had lost my chance to make things right. But standing here today, I finally understand something important. Frank never needed my approval for the path he chose. He had found his purpose in protecting others, in fighting for what was right." She paused, looking down at Ranger, who sat alertly beside her. "This faithful companion taught me that loyalty isn't about waiting for the past to change. It's about carrying forward the mission of those we've lost. Frank died trying to protect this community from corruption. Now, through this foundation, we'll continue his work by supporting the veterans who carry on his spirit of service." Rebecca gestured to the playing puppies and their handlers. "Our therapy dog program will pair trained companions with veterans who need support. These dogs, inspired by Ranger's extraordinary dedication, will help heal the invisible wounds of service. They'll provide the same unconditional love and loyalty that helped Frank through his own struggles." As she spoke, Ranger's tail began to wag. He was watching the veteran handlers work with their puppies, showing an interest he had never displayed during his years of vigilant waiting. It was as if he too understood that his original mission was complete, and a new chapter was beginning. "This park will stand as more than just a memorial," Rebecca continued. "It will be a place of healing, of connection, and of hope. Every veteran who comes here will know they're not alone. Every therapy dog we train will carry forward Ranger's legacy of unwavering loyalty and service." After the ceremony, as people mingled and explored the new facilities, Rebecca found a quiet moment near the granite monument. She traced Frank's etched image with her fingers, remembering his laugh, his determination, his desire to make a difference. "I understand now, big brother," she whispered. "You were fighting for something bigger than yourself. I'm sorry I couldn't see it then, but I see it so clearly now." Ranger pressed against her legs, and she knelt to hug him. His tail wagged as a young veteran approached with one of the therapy puppies in training. The old dog, who had spent so many years avoiding contact with anyone but Rebecca, gently touched noses with the puppy. The veteran smiled, tears in his eyes. "Would you mind if we sat with you for a while?" he asked. "My service dog helped me through the darkest times. I'd like to learn more about training these puppies to help others." Rebecca patted the grass beside her. "Of course, that's exactly what this place is for." As they talked, more veterans and their families joined them, forming a circle near Frank's memorial. Ranger moved among them, accepting gentle pets and offering quiet comfort. His years of solitary waiting were over. Like Rebecca, he had found a new purpose, not in grieving what was lost, but in helping others heal. The autumn sun slanted low across the park, casting long shadows from the monument. But around it, the sound of conversation and laughter filled the air, punctuated by the happy barks of puppies in training. Frank's legacy lived on, not just in stone and memory, but in every life touched by the foundation that bore his name. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the memorial park as families gathered for the monthly Veterans Support Meeting. 6 months had passed since the dedication ceremony, and the park had become exactly what Rebecca had hoped, a place of healing and connection. Ranger walked slowly among the gathered veterans, his graying muzzle held high as he moved from person to person with gentle purpose. He paused beside a young woman in a wheelchair, resting his head on her lap as tears rolled down her cheeks. The woman's fingers curled into his thick fur, finding comfort in his steady presence. Rebecca watched from nearby, her heart full. The transformation in Ranger still amazed her. The dog, who had spent 8 years in solitary vigil, now seemed to have an uncanny ability to sense who needed him most. His certification as a therapy dog had been almost effortless. as if he'd been preparing for this role all along. "He really is something special," said Marcus, a Vietnam veteran who hadn't missed a single monthly meeting. "Never seen a dog with such intuition. It's like he knows exactly what each person needs." Rebecca nodded, watching as Ranger moved to sit beside a young Marine struggling with PTSD. "Frank always said Ranger had an old soul. I think maybe this was his true calling all along, helping others heal." The park had become a sanctuary for veterans and their families. The granite memorial stood as its centerpiece, but around it, new life flourished. Garden beds burst with flowers planted by volunteers. Children played on equipment specifically designed to accommodate disabled veterans who wanted to join their kids. Benches and picnic tables dotted the landscape, creating peaceful spaces for conversation and connection. Today's meeting focused on family support, with spouses and children sharing their experiences alongside the veterans themselves. Rebecca moved between groups, offering both professional guidance and personal understanding. Her veterinary expertise had expanded to include specialized knowledge about service dogs and animal-assisted therapy, making her a valuable resource for families considering four-legged support. "Dr. Torres." A teenage boy approached her, his father hanging back uncertainly. "Dad's thinking about getting a service dog, but he's worried about, taking care of it properly." Rebecca smiled warmly, recognizing the veteran as someone who had been attending meetings for several months but rarely spoke. "Why don't we all sit down together? Ranger and I would love to share what we've learned." They settled at a nearby table, and Ranger immediately positioned himself between father and son, creating a bridge of soft fur and gentle presence. The veteran's tense shoulders gradually relaxed as he stroked Ranger's coat. "I never understood why he stayed at that spot for so long," the veteran said quietly, watching Ranger. "But now I get it. Sometimes the most important mission isn't the one we start with, it's the one we discover along the way." Rebecca felt tears prick her eyes. "That's exactly right. Ranger taught me that too. We think we're stuck in our grief or guilt, but there's always a way forward if we're brave enough to take it." As the afternoon progressed, more families arrived for the evening support session. The park came alive with conversation and occasional laughter. Children played with the therapy dogs in training, while their parents found moments of peace in sharing their struggles and victories. Near sunset, Rebecca walked with Ranger to Frank's memorial. The polished granite reflected the golden light, making her brother's etched image seem almost alive. Fresh flowers always adorned the base. The community had embraced this place as their own. "You'd be proud of him, Frank," she said softly, watching Ranger greet another veteran with gentle enthusiasm. "He's helped so many people find their way home, just like you wanted to do." A small girl approached, holding her father's hand. The veteran walked with a pronounced limp, but his smile was genuine as Ranger turned to welcome them. "Is it true he waited here for 8 years?" the girl asked, carefully petting Ranger's head. Rebecca knelt beside her. "He did. He was protecting something very important, not just evidence, but hope. And now he protects something even more precious." "What's that?" The girl looked up curiously. "The hearts of people who need healing," Rebecca answered. "Just like your dad protected us when he served, Ranger protects people in his own special way." The girl's father cleared his throat, emotion evident in his voice. "These meetings, this place, it's changed everything for us. Seeing Ranger here, knowing his story, it helps remind us that loyalty and love can carry us through the darkest times." Rebecca watched as Ranger led them to a bench settling between father and daughter as naturally as if he'd always been there. This was his new post, his new mission, not waiting alone by a roadside, but surrounded by the people he could help. The Foundation's therapy dog program had grown rapidly, with 12 new handlers currently in training. Each of them had been inspired by Ranger's story, and many were veterans themselves who had found purpose in helping others heal. As darkness fell, solar-powered lights illuminated the paths through the park. Families gathered their belongings, exchanging hugs and promises to return next month. But there was no sadness in the partings, only hope and the comfort of knowing they weren't alone. Rebecca and Ranger walked to her truck, their day's work complete. He no longer looked back at the memorial with longing. Instead, his tail wagged as he jumped into the passenger seat, ready to head home. They're home! The truck's headlights swept across the park's entrance sign as they pulled away. Frank Hutchinson Veterans Memorial Park, where healing hearts find home. Below it, a smaller plaque showed Ranger's image and told his story of dedication and transformation. Tomorrow would bring new veterans seeking hope, new families looking for support, new opportunities for healing. But tonight, as Rebecca drove home with Ranger beside her, she felt the deep peace of knowing they had found their true purpose. Frank's legacy lived on, not in endless waiting, but in the countless lives touched by the faithful dog who had learned to transform grief into healing and loneliness into love. Thank you for watching. If even one moment stayed with you, don't forget to subscribe. I'll be here tomorrow with another story that speaks to the heart.